Hello, welcome to my cloud painting tutorial part 1. We are starting off the video with already having a light Gamsol, like thinned out blue sky. I already have laid down. It is very thin. Not a whole lot of pigment in it. You can still see the brown through it. I have already laid out my lines of what kind of cloud shape I want based off the photo reference provided. I started out with the darker shades, the shadow colors, which will be those darker blues in the middle. And although at some points it looks like I'm adding highlights, this is actually a mid-tone color. The highlight colors are something I save for part 2. It's important to note that when you are beginning a painting and you are trying to create a shape, it's best to start with the darkest of darks and then work your way with the midtones. Highlights are typically used last, as when you're painting oil, you don't want to mesh the colors. Like the highlight will not shine through if you start using the highlights in the beginning. See, look at, I'm doing it there. I did try to use a light on that one because that spot right there, that line I did is a very bright spot in the cloud painting. But when you are painting with highlights in the beginning, the issue that tends to happen is they mix and become midtones when you're working on your darkest darks and your midtones. So save your highlights for last. I am now just blocking in the shapes. The great thing about working with clouds is that you will never make a mistake. You will never make a cloud wrong because clouds do not have one distinct shape, the one all be all of how a cloud is supposed to look. They are essentially formless. Formless meaning they do not have structure, if that makes sense. So painting clouds get to be a lot of fun. I actually really enjoy it. They are one of my favorite things to paint because one, they're dreamy, and two, no one will ever really tell you that you're painting a cloud wrong. So that's the best part about it. And you can just let intuition carry you through the painting. I start going off the reference later on because at some point I just know what kind of vision I'm looking for with my clouds, and I'm letting it take me where I want to go. It may sound counterintuitive, but with clouds, just be free. Let yourself have fun. Don't think so hard about what it's supposed to look like in the reference photo. That's where the magic starts to come in and you start to channel the divine energy. I was trying to find the right words, but you start to channel your artist channel when you're painting a cloud. So it's really enjoyable getting to paint a cloud because you could just do it any way you want to do it and no one's going to tell you you're wrong. And I think the only kind of people who will ever question whether your cloud is perfect would be another artist. As long as you are aware of the direction of the light within the painting, you will always know how to paint a cloud. So if the sun is below the horizon, it's below the clouds, then that means your highlights will be underneath the cloud. Your darkest darks will be on top of the cloud. If the sun is above the cloud, then you will have your highlights on top of the cloud and your darks below the cloud. So that is how you can best gauge which way the lighting will work. And it gets a little more complicated when things like sunsets come in, which I think I might just do a whole other tutorial on sunsets because that's a lot more color and the lighting is at a more complex angle, I would say. Even though it's below the cloud, there's a lot of different things that happen when a sunset occurs. So I will describe that in another video. But for now, just go off that when it comes to lighting. And you can always study the cloud in the reference photo or go cloud watching to really understand the way the light shifts throughout the day. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about brushstroke in this tutorial. And I'm using one brush, typically, I think it's the whole time I'm using it. And it's a filbert, I believe, number 8. Filberts are really great for painting clouds because they have a curved edge. And it's really great because you can make lots of circular motions, lots of round and you can really create a round, full form when you're painting a cloud. I'm about that brush stroke I just used right there. I'm going back and forth really lightly with a light touch to blend out the bottom because it is the most far away part of the cloud. It's the part of the cloud that is in the distance. So I will want typically less detail on the bottom portion of the cloud as it is the farthest away part to the observer. As well as you get closer to the horizon line, things start to become less detailed and a little more muddled. Like the colors are less vibrant and they're a little more meshed together, and it's a little hard to see what it is that far away, right? So when you're looking at the horizon, it's a little hard to see what is there because it's so far away. So when I'm using the brush stroke of going back and forth like really lightly, it's to lightly blend all the colors down there so that it looks farther away and less detailed. Typically, I'll save most of my detail work for the top of the clouds because those part of the clouds are the ones that are actually closest to the observer in the painting. I'm also using this light dabbing motion to put in a few of the details at the top. I will typically use that brush stroke with the little dabby dab, I'll call it the dabby dab, because it allows me to create texture while also not just like blocking in one color. You can, if you use this brush stroke while using one midtone color, then it looks like you're using multiple colors because you're dabbing it on, and it's a light dab. So it tends to kind of go on differently than if you were just doing one sweep of a brush stroke, if that makes sense. So now I'm doing the blendy blend at the bottom and just adding some minor details because I don't want it to be too boring at the bottom of the horizon. I want it to be still kind of forming a shape. The great thing about the curve of this brush is that it allows you to create already a curved like little hook at the top. So it looks like little crescent moons when you're just kind of pressing it on. If you add an angle, if you kind of like lift your brush up, and it'll create like a little crescent moon. But also if you twist your brush different ways, you can, like I just did, you can create little different details within the cloud, within the painting. So play around with the different ways that you like angle your brush because it'll create different shapes within the cloud. You also just saw me wipe off some of the paint on my brush, and typically I'll wipe off paint if I want to have a more blended area. And typically if you wipe off some of the paint on your brush, you can create more of that blend because the paint is not so opaque and it's not going to be so contrasting. Whereas if you have complete paint on your brush and there's just a lot of it, it's going to be really much harder to blend it out and it'll come off really opaque and kind of big. Whereas if you want to create a subtler detail, you can wipe some of that paint off and then try to extend as much as you can that paint around, which is really a great idea. So little paint can go far and a long way is what they say. Other ways I'll create like different strokes with my paintbrush to create different shapes is if I have a part that's really detailed, I'll try to go more at the tip of my brush, more at the edge, because that is going to be the part of the brush that has more control over the shape. So I will typically use that little edge to create more finer details within the painting. And then if I'm trying to blend out a space, blend out like a bunch of blocked in color, I'll try to go a little lighter and then I'll do a few sweeping motions and just kind of like fiddle it around until I find like the right place or like until I like it pretty much. With clouds, you don't have to go too heavy on like pressure on your canvas. You can, if you're making a really wispy and like, shapeless cloud, you'll typically do a lighter touch, kind of like do a few like fancy little sweeps. I'm going to talk a little bit about color in this next part. When you are creating clouds, you need to go really light on the pigment, and majority of it's going to be white. Clouds are not 100% white, no matter what it looks like. So you are never going to have your highlight be the like pure white. You're always going to have a little bit of pigment in it. So typically when I make pigments for clouds, I'm going to do like start out with maybe 80% white and then whatever color I want to do. And clouds, you can typically mess around with color. They're not just like blue and white. I have an assortment of other colors in this, one of them being yellow ochre, one of them being I think it's the purple. I'll list it in the description. Different assortment of blues like Prussian blue, cobalt blue. I'm using a turquoise, a light turquoise, a dark turquoise. And now, as you can see, I'm filling in the sky. And when you're filling in the sky color is never one color. It is not one color. It is an ombre. So typically the darker colors of your sky are always going to be above unless, like I say, the lighting changes. And another thing that makes a cloud look really realistic is using the colors from the sky in your composition, in your cloud. So the way you create a nice looking composition in a painting is if you take the main colors of the painting and you use them all over the painting in different parts, you'll create a better harmonization for your composition and it won't look crazy having all these different shades and all these different colors. So now I'm going back in with the sky color and I'm adding that sky color to my darker shades in the clouds so that they can have a more complementary relationship within the painting. Lastly, don't be afraid to put that sky color right up to the white, right up to the cloud color, because in the end, I'm doing a second layer and it'll dry and I can just go back over it later. But that's all today. I'll talk more about clouds in part 2. Bye, guys.